You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast and check us out online at beardedtheologians.com. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week on the Bearded Theologians, we are going to talk about the worship wars. And so, Zach, as we, the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about hymns and contemporary music in worship. And so that kind of brings us to the head of the good old conversation that we've had for ages, really only the last 25 years in some cases, but probably even further than that, the good old worship wars. And so, Zach, when that comes to mind, what comes to your mind when we talk about that?
Well, the experience that I've had in the church is people are going to complain about the color of the carpet and the type of music that you play. And so, and with that, unfortunately, I found a lot of truth in it. And that kind of means we argue about things that I don't want to say don't matter. The color of the carpet doesn't matter, but music does matter. But we argue about it for the wrong reasons. We argue hymns over contemporary music because of preference more than anything. And I think Matt and I built a strong argument for both hymns and contemporary music. But we also built a strong argument against them too. That in the sense that the music has to fit the moment, and if it doesn't, it really doesn't matter. And at that point, you're just singing to sing, right? If we're singing contemporary music, that's not, theologically sound. And if we're singing hymns that just don't go with the theme, who cares? And so we get into these wars of, well, it has to be hymns. It has to be contemporary. It has to be this, and this. And I think that's where we get in trouble when we deal in absolutes like that. It absolutely has to be this way. And we don't lend ourselves to hear and feel the Spirit moving us in those directions to use a hymn in this place where we normally use a contemporary song, or to use a contemporary song where we might normally use a hymn. And then it comes down to, well, we'll just do it all. We'll do a blended service, which if you do a blended service and it goes well, please call me. I'd like to know how that goes for you. Because blended services are hard. They're probably the hardest type of service that we do in the church. And it's because it's hard to do it well. And I always try to qualify it with people just in my background of, you can ask somebody to do children's ministry and youth ministry, but they're two different mindsets and two different skill sets, and that person's not going to be able to do both well. And I feel the same thing goes for a blended worship service. It's kind of two different mindsets, two different skill sets, and the same person or the same group of people can't do both well. And so it doesn't lend us to be, it doesn't lend itself to worship. And so that's kind of where kind of the basis of the worship wars comes from, I think. What do you think about that?
Well, and I think that too. And I think that the struggle is, as I think about this, the thing that always kind of comes back to my mind is that there are people that want the rock style concert venue style service, and that's fine for them. I get nothing out of those. I mean, I'll be honest. The music might be great, and if it's a great band, it can make for a great atmosphere. And if the lights are right and the fog machine's going, I get the atmosphere, but it's not necessarily a connection to God. It's more of a connection to myself. And I don't necessarily like that. I don't feel spiritual in that moment. And we've kind of poked fun at it, is that some of the modern praise or contemporary music is very thin. And so theologically, I just don't feel like I'm being filled. And the same thing in a traditional service, if your hymns or your liturgy is either dated, or if it's language that's just not inclusive and just good language, then it sucks too. And what happens is that people use a context for whatever they're wanting for worship. They want what will make them feel good, and they feel like they have a connection to God. And I want to push back on that and ask it, is it a connection to God, or are you not allowing and whatever one, how are you allowing God to enter in that space, whether it's contemporary, modern, or traditional, or blended, whatever you want to call it. And then I want to push back even further on this whole worship war concept, is that why isn't just worship? Why, and I hate blended. I hate that term. Blended worship makes no sense whatsoever. But what if the thing that I want to offer up is, what if instead of actually using those terms describing our worship, we just say, hey, we worship together as a community. And that the music that we use is centered and focused around our community. And so there may be a time, and I know of communities and contexts that I've served in, that bluegrass music would fly a lot better than me bringing, David Crowder or Shane in. Not that it wouldn't reach a niche, but I could probably reach more flies with a great bluegrass group than I could with those contemporary music artists, or, just whatever. And so, like, I've definitely been a casualty of the worship wars. I've started and stopped a bunch of contemporary services in my day. Not even just contemporary services, experiential services that were hands-on, and have watched those die, and because of just people want worship in a way that they feel connected to God with. And I think that that's where liturgy, which is really the work of the people, comes into play. And really looking at your worship service and saying, what is it that we do? Like, I joke about ours in Locust Grove is a flux of contemporary, modern, gospel, traditional. So we're country easy is kind of the way I've put it. That we do have a sense of high church, and I wear the robe. We have a processional, we have a choir, we sing some of the hymns, but we also have a touch of the modern every so often. We have videos, we sing praise songs, and I think that that's the deal, that where we've got to shift focus. Instead of talking about worship and compartmentalizing it and siloing it like we do our ministries, what if we just said, hey, we worship together at 10:45. You come experience our style, but we want to encourage you to come a couple of weekends. That way you can kind of get a fullness of who we really are, because it is a seasonal approach. And that's how we do worship. I think the moment that we brand ourselves a particular style of worship, we put ourselves in a corner that you can't get out of.
Well, you do. You lock yourself into something that isn't necessarily listening to the needs of the community. It may just be listening to, well, we got to have a contemporary and a traditional service. And when we do things like that, you're right. We compartmentalize it, but we often see the injustice in it. And at Cyber Church, we have 3 different services, partly because we have 2 campuses. But we've got a very high church traditional, we've got a very laid back contemporary, and then we have your country church, like you say, at our second campus. And sometimes it's hard to avoid that. But there's a way to do that where it's inviting to all people, and it's not the compartmentalization, it's not the segregation of us versus them. And then I think too often, because society is so us versus them through politics and religion and gosh, everything, that we have to stick within our own style instead of branching out. And so we feel that if we start these things, well, other people will come to that and they'll leave us alone over here maybe. Or we could just ignore it and say, well, that's not for me, I'll stay comfortable where I'm at. And that's not good either. We need to push ourselves a little bit and try. And maybe we'll find something life-giving in the traditional service where we wouldn't think we would, or in the contemporary service where we wouldn't think we would. I got to go to a church in Dallas a few years ago, and the pastor, it was a Palm Sunday actually, the pastor was talking about it, and they had kind of some contemporary things going on. And he was like, a year ago, I wouldn't have let this fly. He was like, I had nothing to do with contemporary services. I didn't want to do it. They weren't life-giving to me. And he said, and then somebody pushed back and said, have you tried? And he went, well, no. I'm asking other people to try things that I want them to do, but I'm not willing to try myself. He said, so I tried. I went in with an open mind and an open heart, and guess what? I saw God. And I was like, that's that's a huge confession in front of your church, uh, as well as an example to say, hey, we've got some different things going on. Try, see what you get from it, see where you see God in it. And if you're not seeing God in it, maybe it's you. And maybe it's the worship service, but start with you first.
Yeah.
And so it's that push for you to do something, you to try.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, like I said, I said I don't get anything out of contemporary worship settings, and I really don't. And I've tried. Like, I've been in different settings. I mean, even when I was in Norman, we had a really good contemporary, or they call it modern, service. It was a really good service, but I couldn't get over that hump. It just wouldn't. There was just something in it that wasn't for me. Whereas I could go sit in the traditional service and listen to the liturgy, listen to the choir, and oh my gosh, just wow, it was just so hallelujah. But I think that when we compartmentalize worship, we put ourselves in a really bad place that we don't really need to be in. And then the other side of that is that, when you're sitting down with your worship team, however you do your worship team, pastors and people that are lay people, ask yourself, why are we doing these things? I'm getting ready to walk into a new church here in a few weeks. And, we're going to continue as though James didn't leave for a while. And I'm going to figure out, I want to listen to the community. I want to listen to what they are, and then we'll make adjustments as needed. They just adjusted to one worship service, and so they have a blended service. And so I really want to just listen and feel my way out and find a way that we can worship well. Because my whole deal with worship, if it's done crappy, nobody's going to come. Worship has to be awesome. And it doesn't have to be lights, camera, action awesome, like, just stage lights and all that stuff. But it has to be, and I'm going to use this word, but please understand, I'm using this word to motivate more than I am as a theological reflection. Our performance has to be perfect, which means our readers have to read well. Our singers have to sing well. That doesn't mean that, like, a couple months ago, and when the children were doing their thing, Emily and a friend of Emily's at church Emily's my youngest daughter, wanted to sing Jesus Loves Me as a solo. Okay. So I let them, it was cute. It was definitely worth a moment. Was it perfect? No. Emily sings very nasally. Was it hard to listen to? In some ways, yes. From a performance side, as someone who spent a lot of time in the music world, definitely wouldn't have been acceptable in the music world. But for worship, it was perfect because it was a little child's voice.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. So I lead our praise band, or I've taken over the leadership of our praise band here. In I'm shifting their gears from a performance based to a worship based, and there's a difference. The performance has to be there. It has to be good. It has to be quality. But when we enter in with a worship mindset, this is why we're here. This is the sermon topic for the day. These are why we're singing the songs we're singing. If they're a little nasally, if they're a little off, if we mess up a little bit, it's not a big deal, but it lends itself to worship. But if it's solely that performance of, oh man, I'm going to go rock this out, yeah, you lose something. You lose something in that perfection. And so, for Emily to get up there, one, she's a kid. They're going to think she's adorable no matter what she does up there. But the same goes for adults and people. It shows the humanity of, hey, we're people too. And we do. It has to be quality, like you say. But there's room for grace in those areas, and I think people see that.
But I think it's stiff. But I think it's also a fine line too, and that there are be times where cousin so and so that wants to stand up and sing a special. Cousin so and so can't sing worth a lick. Right. Is that 5 minutes of worship that you really want people to experience? And if it's that great song, I can only imagine that people love to sing. Right. And I admit, like, people still love to sing that song. And they butcher it. Right. And there's a line
between quality and sucking.
Well, yeah,
you can't suck.
And I think that's the struggle. And how do you manage that in a worship experience where people will feel loved and connected and all that great stuff that goes along with that. But here's what it is in regards to worship wars. the problem we've run into is that we want worship like we want our television. Right now, the big pushback on cable TV is that we can't have what we want. You know, we can go to Netflix and we can watch anything that we want, you know, that they have. We can go to Hulu, you know, we can be selective on that stuff. And people want that with worship. And I don't think that that's what worship can be. Worship needs to be a community collective of people and a community voice and a community conversation to where people can actually get together and feel connected. And that's why I think that you have to use language of the community. If you're not using language of the community, it ain't gonna work. And I, when we were in Denver and we were with Jerry, was that not worship?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the music was definitely not something you could play on Sunday morning. You know,
Dropkick Murphys only go so far on Sunday morning.
You know, the passing of the peace was probably a little bit different, but those elements were there, and definitely connected with God, not only through the work of the sandwich building, but also the work of the conversations with, as Jerry preached, and as you know, all that stuff that went along, and so like this worship war that has apparently been going on. Some people say it goes on for the last 20 years. I think it's been going on since the beginning of time, because anytime you try to get people to do something together, there's always going to be pushback. But I think the real question to answer as you are putting together worship, or as you're looking at worship, is how does this relate to the community? And does it speak what the community needs and needs to hear from God?
The way that I've qualified it for churches for a long time, has been asking them, is a preference over purpose. We're doing these things in worship. We're very intentional about picking songs and sermon topics and scriptures and everything from the beginning to the end for these seasons of time. And is what you want us to add or take away from the service preference over the purpose of what worship is? And that's a hard question for people, because usually it's, well, I don't like this or that. Why? I just don't like it. It's not me. Okay, but this is the purpose that it serves. And we're trying to listen to the heartbeat of the community and the congregation and people, and bring that purpose in, so that in multiple ways you can connect with God. And not everybody's going to connect with God in the same way. And so if we're, oh gosh, I'm going to say this, and don't hate me. If worship is purpose driven, sorry, Warren, are we really in worship? But if worship is preference driven, sorry, I can't talk, is it worship? But if it's purpose driven, it's worship, because there's purpose behind it, has meaning, rather than this is just how we like it. And
it's what I
like YouTube or
it's what I like. It's what I like.
It's what I like. And that's understandable. A little bit of that goes into it too, but if it's solely driven by your preference,
well,
the purpose is lost.
And I think that that's where evaluation of worship is necessary, to ask the community, not just ask those people that are gatekeepers, but to really ask the community this question. You know, what do you all like? What do you listen to? What speaks to your soul? And not saying that if so and so wants this, that's what they're going to get, but just say, hey, we just want to hear from you, so that way we can, as we're thinking of worship and worship planning, we can actually, I remember when so and so said they liked this, or they like this hymn, and be open to what that could mean for people. It's amazing to see when we open ourselves up to that sort of stuff, that what can really happen.
Even when say you take Christmas, you take Advent, and you're promoting your Christmas Eve service, and Christmas Eve is a very high energy. There's a lot of celebration in Christmas Eve, and you have people who are dealing with loss and tragedy and death and depression and things like that during the holiday season. I just really don't think the Christmas Eve service is what I need right now. And so you begin to hear those things, and well, we have this Blue Christmas service where it's intentional to come and heal and mourn these things and do some things that hopefully will help you celebrate in your way this Christmas season. And I've seen those conversations be very, very life-giving in places where people are like, man, I just don't want to do Christmas Eve this year. I'm sad. It's just not feeling it. But I want to do something. I want to worship in some way. I just can't do the celebration. And so, there's that. There's those parts of it too, that we create space for people to connect with God in various ways.
Well, and I think that's where, like for me, last year, I'll use Mother's Day as a good example of this, because last year I did not want to lead worship on Mother's Day. It was my first Mother's Day after my mom had passed. I mean, it was still really fresh. I mean, and so, I took the Sunday off and we attended another church service, and I was a little bit, I did not like the way that it was done. Not that the service itself was still lacking in a sense of just quality. Like, I mean, it was still not as good as I was hoping it would be. But on those kind of special Sundays, like Mother's Day, Father's Day, and some of those other holidays that we celebrate, to be intentional about lifting up women and saying, hey, you all are all mothers in some way, shape, or form. And acknowledging that, and that's simple. And hey, on behalf of the church, here's a little gift. We want to give you a flower, and just be all mothers, all women. I think that's the best way to do it. I don't know if there's another way to do it. I
don't think there is. And that's such a hard day, because you have people dealing with so much, whether it's loss or not being able to have children, or their kids being off at college, or adults and not coming, whatever it is. Mother's Day is a tough day.
Yeah. Well, and Father's Day and even some of those other holidays like Thanksgiving and and I think that's where, like, these worship words that we have, because you brought up Advent season, and how many conversations do you have where we want to sing those Christmas carols? But here was my compromise, and this is always going to be my compromise, and this is what I'm always going to offer. We will do a Christmas carol service at a different time during Advent, and you can come sing those songs one time to make yourself feel good. Just that way, then, hey, we did it, and we're not going to sing it in worship on Sunday morning because, it's, Jesus hasn't been born yet.
Well, the same thing goes for Lent and Easter. We want to put Jesus on the cross before he actually gets there.
I have a hard time with that one too.
And so there's a purpose for these things.
Well, and it goes back to the early Jews and the way they tell stories. Actually, still the way Judaism tells stories today. They always reflect upon the history and move in a certain story and a narrative that is just so great. But Christianity has kind of lost that sense of narrative. They've lost that sense of storytelling. And it goes true with our worship service. Our worship service should be like a story, and have a great beginning and a great end to send you out into the world to be re-energized and refocused, restored, renewed, to go out and face this world that we serve in. And man, I can tell you, more churches that I've ever attended, I don't ever feel equipped to go out in the world attending them. Like, I love the way they do it, Church of the Resurrection, the way that you're sent out. I mean, it's a forceful send out. I mean, the times I've been there and watched Adam like go out into the world and just, and I try to do the same thing in Locust Grove. One of the things I've started doing in Locust Grove, and I did this like 2 years ago, and this has been phenomenal, is that our benediction is our mission statement. We are called to, and then they respond, live God's way. You were called to. Right. And then the last line of the liturgy is, then go out into the mission field. And then I always insert whatever my sermon challenge was to do this, but also to live, share, and serve. Go now in peace.
Right.
And so
my benedictions always end in just go. Go.
Get out of here.
leave this building and go do something.
Chicken is calling. And so I think
exactly.
So as we bring this worship war conversation to the close, and we could talk about worship style for ages, and we'll probably bring it up again sometime in the later future. But seriously, look at your worship and ask yourself, why do you do what you do? and ask yourself, certain things, certain traditions that your church does that they don't do anywhere else. Just ask yourself why. What is the reasoning for this? And ask yourself the real God question. Where's God in this? And
please ask that question before you complain and say, I
yes,
don't like this.
Yes, I like that actually, and I think that's a good thing. Is to sit down. Is to do that. Is to sit down and just say, hey, where's God in this? And challenge yourself. If you're a pastor and you curate a worship where people are going to feel connected to God, and be serious and adamant about it, and spend time with the people and get to know them and find out what their likes and dislikes are. That doesn't mean you have to create a worship service that everybody's going to like, but create something that it's going to touch people's hearts. Because when you do that, that's how we get people in the church. And it doesn't matter about age, range, or any of those little crazy dynamics or demographics that we're looking for. If you curate a worship that connects people to God, they will come back, and it won't matter.
And the crazy thing about that is you might have to change your worship service.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to change your order of worship. Don't be afraid to do that. And people are going to complain, but ask them, where do you find God in this?
People complained about what Jesus did
push
too.
back and say, right. and push back and say, have you tried? Have you tried to find God in these things? Because here's why we're doing it. We're just trying to do something that's life-giving to people, and that they can connect with God, and then go out and connect people in the community.
So this has been one of those bad sermon endings for this podcast where we had multiple endings.
Yeah.
But we want to encourage you to reflect theologically upon your worship and ask yourself why, and then figure out
why do you do what you do?
Where is God in this? We want to encourage you to like our YouTube page and to like all the stuff that we have going on. We've got some great blogs that have been written, and even go back and look at our old Beardcast. The other day I had pulled up the one, the third Bishop Harvey conversation about Israel, and it's a really good, exciting conversation with Bishop Harvey. And we've had some other ones that are just have been really exciting the last couple of months. And we want to encourage you to go back and listen. And if you're going to listen to us, if this is the first one you're listening to, listen to the latest ones first. And then if you really want to feel brave, go back and listen to those first ones. We recognize that our first ones, we are not perfect. We're moving towards perfection, okay?
We're good Methodists.
But we want to encourage you to go on our website, pick up a couple of T-shirts, a couple of coffee mugs. It's Mother's Day time. It'd be great to buy your mom a T-shirt that says you can't put theology in a corner, buy a coffee mug, just help support us, because any money that we get, so far it's only been our money that we've put into it because we love buying coffee mugs and stickers. Okay. But any of that we roll back right into the podcast, and podcasts do cost money to make, and we're hoping to be able to not make our wives too mad at us for this hobby that we've created. But we want to thank you for your support, and we hope just share us and be part of the conversation.
When does this come out? Is this in 3 weeks?
No, this one comes out now.
No, this is today. So we're going to have some cool live things coming up. We're going to be together in Las Cruces, New Mexico at the beginning of June. And we're looking at putting together a live podcast. And so we'll be looking for details on that.
So for the Bearded Theologians, this is Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold.
And may the fourth...
I got you. I'm not going to let you do it.
May the fourth be with you. And remember,
I refuse.
I do the editing.
Refuse. You will not get that in there.
So may the fourth be with you. Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we hope that you share our content online through Facebook and social media. And we hope that you check out our Beardcast store at beardedtheologians.com and pick up some great Bearded Theologians gear. We hope you have a good day.